Phil Perry covers the Patriots and basically everything else for NBC Sports Boston.com, but I know that he has been deep in the draft from the very beginning. So, Phil, thanks for taking a couple minutes to join me and kind of debrief after a wild weekend.
A lot went on, Manno, but I'm fully rested. I'm ready to go.
Okay. Well, we know that the Patriots spent a ton in free agency, right? So they came into the draft in kind of a unique position, but they walk away from this thing, I think, to many people's surprise who haven't been paying attention, with not only for a plan for future at quarterback, but with a pair of players that you define as pretty promising. And I would agree with that. But let's start with the headline: Mac Jones dropping at 15. How tailored is Mac Jones to the Patriots system and what they're trying to do?
He's a great fit for what they want to do. And what was interesting going into this draft, Carolyn, was we were going to find out for the first time in a long time what Bill Belichick really values at quarterback, because there was a unique opportunity this year in that the Patriots were drafting higher than ever before, and this was an unusually deep quarterback class. But the quarterbacks were very different all the way down, 1 through 5. And so I thought that they should just take advantage of those stars aligning where they're drafting and where the depth at the position is this year and just take one. But the flip to that is they're not just going to take anybody, right? They're not just going to take any quarterback that falls to them at 15. He has to be right for them. We just didn't know, in Bill Belichick's heart of hearts, does that mean they want the athlete with the big arm, Trey Lance or Justin Fields? They want the accurate processor guy who just plays in the pocket, which is Mac Jones. And we found out if they really loved Justin Fields, who fell all the way to 11, they could have moved up and tried to get him. And Bill Belichick could have said, hey, this is where the game is going. We need athletes there now. That's the kind of quarterback that wins in today's age. He didn't do that. He didn't even trade up for Mac Jones, but Mac Jones was the guy he picked at 15. They like Mac Jones a lot. He is that quarterback that is going to give you what you want in terms of timing, decision-making, accuracy, all that stuff that they valued so highly when Tom Brady was with them. So the fit is great for that scheme, Carolyn. I think there is a conversation to be had, though. Is that scheme good in today's NFL, right? I mean, we're watching Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson and all these young quarterbacks that can run around and do all sorts of things off script that are great players. If you're asking a young quarterback to be Tom Brady or to be Drew Brees and be that supercomputer from the pocket, I'm just not sure that's a recipe for success. So does he fit the scheme? Yes. Is the scheme good in 2021? I don't know. That remains to be seen.
I guess it maybe depends on how good their offensive line is, if they want to kind of stay in line with what they've been doing for so long and give him chances to develop and stay safe back there. But you bring up such a good point, and you wrote about this for NBC Sports Boston too. And for anybody that's listening or watching, go read Phil's kind of complete debrief and assessment of the draft, because you go position by position and also just through every single one of the picks that they made. And it's great stuff and really good analysis.
Thank you.
But that being said, you did raise a point about Justin Fields kind of in your review, which is this conversation, like, should they have gone with the more athletic guy? We don't have a crystal ball here, so I think time will tell. But is there a case to be made that Justin Fields would have been a better decision, a better grade, so to speak, at the quarterback position, even though I think a lot of Patriots fans would probably just be thrilled either way that they're coming out of this draft weekend with a clearer vision of what to expect at quarterback in the future?
Yeah, some quarterback, any quarterback. I think Patriots fans would have been happy with that if it had been Justin Fields who fell or Mac Jones who fell. And we don't know, right? I mean, the Patriots could have been in on Justin Fields conceivably, and they just weren't willing to give up as much as the Chicago Bears were to go from 20 to 11 to get from 15 to 11. I just don't think that that's necessarily what they're looking for. And it's funny, what Bill Belichick has been looking for at the quarterback position, now that we know that they've taken Mac Jones in the first half of the first round, has been the same, Carolyn, really for 30 years. There were some scouting notes that sort of were unearthed last year by Daniel Jeremiah, NFL Network, who worked for the Ravens, which was an offshoot of the Browns, obviously, which is where Bill Belichick was in the early 90s. And he had some scouts from that era that took some notes that Daniel Jeremiah unearthed, and he posted them. And the description for what Bill Belichick wanted at quarterback in 1991 is Mac Jones to a T. Nothing there about athleticism, nothing there about arm strength. It's all about good decisions, accuracy, timing, good fundamentals. That's it. And so I think Bill Belichick, really, his opinion of what matters at quarterback hasn't changed. I mean, Tom Brady was that guy too, and He just so happened to fall into Tom Brady in 2000. Now Mac Jones falls to him at 15, and it just kind of works out perfectly. I think Justin Fields is going to be the better NFL quarterback. I do. Talk about accurate. I mean, this guy is arguably the most accurate quarterback in the draft class, especially deep down the field. The issue with Fields, I think from a Patriots perspective, after talking to some people the last couple of weeks, is it takes him a little while to get rid of the football. He does have some vision issues that I think scouts have marked and say, well, why did he pass up that open throw to try to throw it into coverage deep down the field here? Great throw deep down the field here, 40-yard gain, but he gave up the 8-yard gain on 3rd and 7. And so that kind of thing, I think, would make the Patriots a little more wary. Whereas if it were my team, I see Justin Fields as like a taller version, potentially, a taller version of Russell Wilson. Mac Jones, I think his ceiling is maybe something closer to Derek Carr or Kirk Cousins or a quarterback along those lines.
Well, it goes to this conversation, too, that a couple of the NFL guests that I've had on have mentioned. I'm thinking about Michael Lombardi, who, of course, is close with Belichick and has been with me on this before. And one of the things he always underscores, and some other, writers have, too, is that what really matters is that the quarterback fits the system. And, I guess maybe that is the most important point for the Patriots. If they're going to do what they're going to do regardless, they might as well go get a guy that fits that mold better than the most elite athlete that could have been at their disposal. I don't know. I is more important than intangibles or overall quality or, athleticism, versatility. I guess you want to get a guy that fits in with whatever you're going to do if you're kind of hell-bent on doing it.
There's no doubt about that. I think system fit, scheme fit matters. And that's why for people like us, we're not running NFL teams. Like, I liked all 5 quarterbacks in this year's draft. They were all very different. I would be okay with any of them because I don't have to worry about that sort of stuff, the offense and the X's and O's. And so I do understand that part of it. Another angle to look at that kind of question, though, is this. Look at what the Ravens did in 2018, right? They had Joe Flacco. They'd had some success with Joe Flacco. They didn't have an elite athlete at the quarterback position who was going to change their running game and change their offense. But they went out of their way. They traded back into the first round to draft Lamar Jackson, next level specimen in terms of his skills at that position. They totally changed their offense. So like scheme fit matters, I think. I do think there's a conversation though there on the coaching end to say, well, if you're a great coaching staff, if you're a great offensive coach, can you not take a great talent and mold the scheme to the talent? So there's a sliding scale there in terms of how you value those two different things and how willing you are to change based on the players that are available to you.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the other things that you detailed is that they picked a running back in the 4th round. What does that offer? I know you know this by now, covering the Patriots as closely and as well as you do. You're always kind of reading between the tea leaves, whether it's at press conferences or with the decisions that they make in the draft. Does choosing a big, burly running back in the 4th round tell you anything about the kind of offense that they're going to have next season?
I don't think there's any doubt. They want to ground and pound, and they want to beat teams up. They've got a massive offensive line. You look at Trent Brown, who's, at times in his career been close to 400 pounds. They have this great player who was a rookie last year, Michael Onwenu, who came in at 350 pounds, is going to be playing guard for them. Shaq Mason's one of the best run blocking guards in the league. Like, they are built to bully, is how I would put it. I mean, between Damian Harris, you still have Sony Michel on the roster. Now you add a 230-pound back. This is a team that's going to want to use a fullback a lot. We know what they did at tight end, adding 2 tight ends. So they're going to be in heavy personnel. So either 2 tight ends or 2 backs or both, I would say the majority of the time offensively. And so that can work. It's a total Belichick move in that it is a zig when the rest of the league is zagging. It's such a pass-happy league. Defenses are all geared towards stopping the pass, stopping the big play through the air. And so you're seeing a lot of defensive backs on the field, and you're seeing a lot of, when they're linebackers on the field, some of them are 220 pounds. That's a strong safety when Bill Belichick was coaching in Cleveland back in the 90s. So he says, well, let's get big people and let's run over them. All well and good. It worked for the Patriots in 2018. They won a Super Bowl like that. You still are going to have to pass the football. And that's where I would come away from this draft saying, did they do enough? Because you are still, even if you're a great running team, you're going to run into 3rd and 5. You're going to run into 3rd and 7. And you're going to have to make a throw. And somebody's going to have to get open. And maybe the tight ends can do that. The receivers haven't really proven they can do that outside of Nelson Aguilar last year. They don't have a ton of separators, Carolyn. And so whether it's Cam Newton or Mac Jones playing quarterback, I worry about their passing game a little bit, that they're just not going to have enough in the way of separation talent to make it easy on those quarterbacks to convert and to keep the offense on the field.
It's just so funny because everybody you talk to says that the run game is going away and these highly specialized skill players are the ones that are in demand. And then, of course, leave it to Bill Belichick and the Patriots to not even draft a receiver until the 7th round.
Right.
I mean, like with Trey Nixon and stuff with receivers, did they miss the mark?
Well, and it took Ernie Adams to draft the receiver at the end of the draft. Ernie Adams, Bill's right-hand man for decades. This is his last draft. It sounds like he's sort of easing out of his career with the Patriots here. His last draft, and he makes the final pick, and it's a receiver. It's only the second receiver they've drafted in the last 3 years. Been 3 really deep receiver classes. And prior to Trey Nixon, the only receiver they had drafted was N'Keal Harry. I think, Carolyn, if I'm looking at this draft, I would have expected them to come away with a receiver, not necessarily in the first round, quarterback in the first round. Have at it. Go ahead. Do it. Much more important position. Second round, third round, that's where I would have been looking. Again, some really good talent and really good slot receiver talent. And you look at this roster right now, I'm not sure who the slot receiver is. You know, there's going to be a lot of talk here in New England and I think nationally, depending on how this goes for the Patriots, about the 2011 season that the Patriots had. They rewrote the record books when it came to tight end production that year. Rob Gronkowski and Aaron Hernandez, they both lit it up. It was their second season in the NFL. Tom Brady running the controls. Wes Welker was a true number one, maybe not in terms of his size, but he had almost 200 targets that year, one of the best receivers in the league. There's going to be a lot of talk about that year and that offense and this year and this offense because of the 2 tight ends. I look at it, though, and say, I don't love the comp because, yes, you have 2 tight ends. You don't have the receiver talent you had back in 2011. You don't have a Hall of Fame quarterback, and the 2 tight ends that you have aren't as good as the ones that you had in 2011. So now you're going to be even more tight end heavy because you have less at receiver and you have, less at quarterback, and you're going to turn to these tight ends even more, and they're not quite as good as Rob Gronkowski or Aaron Hernandez were. I don't know if that's a great recipe for success, honestly. You still need receivers in today's NFL, even if you do want to zig when others zag. And so the investment at that spot with 1 pick in the 7th round was not enough to me.
How do you justify the thinking here that they are seemingly making some of these decisions that would conflict with what the rest of the league is doing?
I think they see value in it. I think they look at it and they say, well, nobody wanted Mike Onwenu because he was 350 pounds because he doesn't move well enough for the rest of the NFL. But we'll take him and we'll run a power-based running game, and we're just going to try to dominate you that way. The league is obsessed with speed right now. And so that's all well and good. If you have more fast guys than the others do, I think the Patriots look at it and say, well, do we try to just accumulate a bunch of speed when everybody's buying speed? You're seeing players like Kadarius Toney this year drafted in the first round. He's kind of a gadget player. He doesn't really run routes. He might end up being a great slot receiver in the NFL, but I think the Patriots view this as people are overvaluing speed. And so they say, how can we combat that? And they've always wanted to be, Carolyn, a big, strong, tough, physical team that can compete in December and January, right? That's where their most important games are going to be played. And for their part, they're hoping those games are going to be played outdoors in Foxborough. How much does speed really matter in those types of games if you're playing in the snow and the slush and the sleet at Gillette Stadium? So they would rather beat you with physicality and toughness. And so I think they see opportunities, whereas, a player like Rhadmondre Stevenson might have been drafted in the 2nd round a few years ago because other teams valued that too. Now, very few teams do. And so you can get a player like that in the 4th round, and that's how they want to build. They see market inefficiencies with size and toughness, and those are the guys they're going to invest in.
Yeah, that's really interesting to think about how when they play factors into the decisions that they make. I mean, far be it for me to question anything that they do, and there's certainly a method to the madness for the vision that they have. But help me understand the thinking from Bill Belichick's point of view of why they would move up and take Mac Jones's teammate, a guy like Christian Barmore, and give up what some would say is a decent amount for that kind of player.
Yeah, even Bill Belichick acknowledged it was sort of an overpay. When you just look at those trade value charts, those draft pick value charts, I think the reason they did it was because they love the talent. I think Christian Barmore, for a lot of teams, was a first rounder through and through talent-wise. There's no question about it. There were some off the field things with Christian Barmore in terms of his maturity, his emotional maturity, how he handled adversity at the University of Alabama. I think there are some questions there that were swirling around him in scouting circles. I know that. And so that's why you see a clear-cut first-round talent, a guy who dominated other pros, guys who were getting drafted on the offensive lines at Notre Dame and Ohio State in the college football playoff, dominated them and was the best player on the field at times against those offensive lines. That kind of player doesn't usually fall to the second round. So they love the talent. I think the other reason, though, that you trade up and you consolidate some of those picks that you have, they came into the weekend with 10 picks. If you look at this roster, they had addressed so many needs in free agency, Carolyn, that there were not 10 roster spots on the team. And I'm sure that's how they viewed it too. I mean, they drafted a guy in the 5th round who's not even going to play for them this year. He's probably going to end up on a reserve list, and he's going to be a 2022 guy. So they know they're pretty well stocked in terms of overall talent, veteran talent on the roster. So they came into this draft saying, okay, how many roster spots do we really have for guys coming out of this draft class? If it was only 4 or 5, and I think it's probably around there, then why not package 2 4th-rounders as they did to move all the way up near the top of the 2nd round and take a first-round talent? That makes a lot of sense to me. What I would have done, and again, Christian Barmore might end up being a great player. Bill Belichick's had a lot of success drafting defensive tackles high in the draft. I would have, for more of an immediate impact, taken a receiver. I think especially when you're looking at Mac Jones, a guy who's used to throwing to wide open receivers at Alabama. If he ends up playing his rookie year, he's going to be throwing to a group of pass catchers that just don't get open. I think it's hard. So, Rondale Moore was somebody who went right after Christian Barmore, slot receiver out of Purdue. I mean, that's a Wes Welker type right there. And I think they really could use that guy, and they don't have him right now.
Who do you see starting next season under center for the Patriots?
Very conflicted here on this. So I sort of have a developing take that I'm not going to be real solid on, which you're going to hate me for, Carolyn. But I see it 2 ways. Number one, Bill Belichick doesn't want to have to lean on a rookie quarterback if he doesn't have to, right? They want to coach the hell out of him. They want to give him the entire playbook. They want to make sure he understands every nuance of every option route and every check at the line to make sure that they're not putting him in a bad situation. I mean, they've invested highly in this kid. They don't want to throw him to the wolves and have him fall on his face or not be prepared and feel like they're going to have to sort of sift through the wreckage after that kind of start to his career. On the other hand, they're not really well set up to let him sit, unfortunately for them. Cam Newton is sort of the antithesis of Mac Jones in terms of style of play, right? So if we set off the top of the conversation here, Mac Jones a perfect fit for the offense that they want to run. Timing, accuracy, decision-making from the pocket. Cam Newton, even when he was an MVP, he's really never been among the most accurate quarterbacks in the league. He's obviously a tremendous athlete, and he has tremendous playmaking ability, and he is a headache for opposing defenses to try to prepare for because of all the things he brings to the position. And on top of it, he's a great leader, and he's a great worker, and the Patriots love him for those things. But if they want to run the offense they want to run, Cam Newton's really not the ideal guy for that. So do they run the offense they want to run with a guy who looks like a good fit and a guy who a lot of people think is pro-ready? Or do they do the thing that they would like to do in a perfect world and let the rookie quarterback sit? I think by the end of training camp, Carolyn, we might be looking at it and saying they can't not start Mac Jones just because he might not wow anybody, but he's going to put the football where it needs to be put through the air in critical situations. And it's only going to be practice that we're seeing at that point. But if he's not starting by week 1, I think he's so much more accurate, at least from what he's shown us in the college level, that I don't think it'll be too long before we see him on the field for the Patriots.
It's interesting because the general consensus, I feel like outside of New England, is like, oh, you got Mac Jones. He fell in your lap at 15. Of course, that's going to be the guy based on what we've seen over, the last season in particular with Cam Newton. But, you raised such an interesting point that they don't have a lot of receivers to make him feel comfortable right off the bat. And they seem to be making, some decisions that would get in the way of his success. And of course, he needs time to develop. I've already kept you way too long, so I won't keep you any longer. But I do want to know overall with all the spending that they did in free agency, they did get a quarterback quarterback, whether or not he's starting next season. And they filled some other significant gaps. I mean, what grade overall would you give the offseason in its totality for the Patriots?
Boy, it's high. I'd give them an A-. I would. When you can go into free agency and fill as many needs as they filled, I mean, that's starting strong. That's really what you should be doing in free agency, right? In theory, the draft, you'd just be taking the best players available all the time. And then as needs arise, offseason after offseason, you'd use the money that you have and fill in the gaps that way. They had so many holes, though, to fill that they couldn't fill them all. They almost did. The one that was left was quarterback, and then they come away with a quarterback in the first round. So I can't kill them at all for what they've done this offseason. I do think they got a quarterback who's relatively ready to play. And so, again, I think he's going to play relatively early. And they've given themselves a chance to really compete, Carolyn. They couldn't be competitive last year. They just were too limited in too many ways. Their front seven, the quarterback position, the receiver position, the tight end position, it was – I mean, it's remarkable that they won 7 games last year. It really is, and it's a testament to Bill Belichick and to Josh McDaniels and the coaching that those guys got. So I give him an A-, and I think that has the potential to turn into an A if we see Mac Jones play and play well early on. It's not impossible. We see rookies play at that position in the NFL and play early and do great things. And so if Mac Jones can be one of those guys, and he's going to have an opportunity because the position is just not that strong, this could easily get even a little bit more of a bump there, A- today to an A. I don't know if I'm an easy grader, though, Carolyn. That's just I've never been a teacher before. I find I'd have a real hard time doing that. I don't know, too nice or something maybe. But I feel good about an A-.
I think Mac Jones is probably going to start next season. But, I mean, what do I know? I really come away feeling a little bit – I don't know if Patriots fans would even agree with this, but just kind of sad for Cam Newton because, last season was so disrupted by so many different things. And he was gambling on himself, obviously took that deal initially with the Patriots, which was very low risk, high reward, and just wasn't able to get it done. I mean, it's the National Football League, so the pressure's so high, but you got to be wondering kind of what's going through his head now as he realizes that his options are getting infinitely smaller as the day goes on.
Listen, he'll have a chance, right, to compete this year. Bill Belichick, again, I think really wants him to be the guy right away. And the reason I hold out a little bit of hope from Cam Newton's end that he will be able to win the job and he will be able to kind of take this and run with it is that, number one, the offense has been way better built up for him. We're talking about how they don't have many guys who separate. Cam Newton over the course of his career hasn't really cared. He's made a living off of throwing to big receivers and tight ends and contested catches and all that sort of thing. And so they have those guys now. So that's number one. Number two, he might just be healthier. We talked to Tom House, who's Tom Brady's throwing coach, and really like a mechanics guru for baseball players and football players, but mostly football players now, even though he was a pro baseball player back in the day. And he's worked with Cam Newton in the past. And he said, really, the issue has not been Cam's shoulder, which has issues. It's been his foot. He missed so much time with his foot a couple of years ago that he felt as though Cam was still recovering from the foot. And it's like a golf swing. If you had somebody, whacking your toe with a hammer every time you pulled your club back to take a swing, like, the rest of your body might feel great, but the shots are going to look atrocious because it's going to be tough to pull off. And so he was indicating to us the foot should be good by now. He's had time to heal. And if the foot's good, then he's going to be good. And so maybe that's all it is. Maybe just need a little bit more time to heal. So I wouldn't give up on Cam Newton just yet, but his body's obviously been through so much the last few years that if he does have a little bit more for this year, I think even the Patriots would tell you, and their first round pick would tell you, they're not banking on that happening and being something to lean on for several years.
All right, Phil Perry, thanks so much for the insight and the time. Really appreciate it. And again, NBC Sports Boston is the place to find Phil, and he's always writing great stuff, covering the Patriots so extensively. Thank you so much, Phil.
Thanks so much for having me, Carolyn.